Joining me now to discuss these 8 NATO issues, our opening panel, former U.S. Marine Corps Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer and Middle East expert Ali Sinar. Good to have you both with us. Hal, let's start with you. 70 years later, does the NATO alliance still make sense?
Michelle, it makes lots of sense, and certainly the threat, if you look across that region, is as great as it's ever been. Russia is pushing forward. Of course, they just unilaterally annexed Crimea. They're in eastern Ukraine. If you go to the Baltics, they feel tremendous pressure, a lot of concern by Russia. But also there's other challenges collectively that NATO has to look at. NATO isn't just in Europe. It's not just in the North Atlantic region either. You have a huge NATO commitment that's been going on for many years in Afghanistan. And actually, a lot of the NATO members, like Germany, have more forces, military forces overseas now than they've ever had, at least for Germany, since World War II. So it's a very dynamic organization, but it's in transition.
Ali, we had the President and President Macron discussing a number of issues, as we mentioned, ISIS. They also discussed Turkey, keeping in mind that Turkey has recently purchased the Russian S-400 missile defense system. It's also establishing closer ties with Moscow. Now, the president said that they're looking at whether to impose sanctions against Turkey. We had the French president asking how it's even possible for Turkey to be a member of the alliance and buy military equipment from Russia. Now, you can't argue that Macron isn't making a good point here. Ali, should Turkey still be a NATO member?
Definitely. I mean, Turkey has the second largest army in NATO, and Turkey is serving in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kosovo with the other NATO allies. So Turkey has a very strong position in NATO family, and we see that. And of course, NATO presence in Turkey also is strong. Turkey is a part of the global coalition as well. What Macron saying against Turkey was totally funny, because Macron also forget that France was trying to sell Navy ships to Russia in the past. So that was the reason that why Turkey
Ali, hypocrisy aside, though, and I hear your point there, does it make sense, though, that you have an alliance against Russia when one of the members, as you point out, one of the members with the second strongest military is so closely aligned to Moscow?
Right. I mean, individually also, like, I am against also that Turkey shouldn't buy Russian missiles. But there's this story. Turkey was trying to get Patriot missiles from NATO allies, including United States. And during the Obama administration, it didn't happen. United States couldn't give the Patriot missiles, so Turkey was looking other options. At this time, unfortunately, Turks bought the missiles, so there is no solution right now, and we might see sanctions coming soon.
Hal, what do you think? Should Turkey's membership in NATO be reevaluated?
Michelle, I think all NATO members right now are asking if they should reevaluate Turkey. The buying of the S-400 system is bad enough, but then I think you may have seen this last week, they were actually using the radar system against F-16s and other NATO aircraft to try and figure out the telemetry and the data input and all those things. That's exactly why we said we won't sell F-35s, because we were afraid that they would use that Russian system to basically gather intelligence to find vulnerabilities to our NATO systems. I mean, it's not like they bought weapons from China or some other country. They bought it from Russia. That's really what NATO was set up to contain. And Turkey's going to have to figure out which way it's leading. This has always been an issue for Turkey. Are they with Europe and North America, or I should say Europe and the North Atlantic, or are they more a regional player, more oriented towards the Middle East? And certainly this has gone back and forth, but I think there's going to be a lot of very tough words with Turkey.
All right, Hal, Ali, stick around. We have a lot more to discuss coming out of this NATO summit. And that includes a key result of a controversial move by the president. It was at the NATO summit 2 years ago that President Trump began his very public push to get Europe's nations to pay more for their own defense. We'll take a look at the results of those efforts. And in Israel, there's been no breakthrough politically as another meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz comes to nothing. You're watching Clear Cut. Welcome back. I'm Michelle McCory. Our top story tonight is the flurry of news coming out of the NATO summit in London. And President Trump's comments about French President Macron or the US-China trade dispute are grabbing most of the headlines. But there has also been confirmation today of the results of a rather controversial move that the president began making 2 years ago. Now, during the first NATO summit Mr. Trump attended as president, he openly criticized European NATO members for not paying their agreed-upon shares to fund their own defense. Now, several NATO analysts and political pundits strongly rebuked President Trump for making that public push. Many of them predicted that this would never work and cause a more serious backlash. But fast forward to today, and now 8 European countries are on track to finally meet their NATO funding promises. Those countries are Britain, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says that a majority of NATO's 29 members now plan to hit their promise of spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense by 2024. The total increase in defense spending since 2016 by Europe and Canada is now $130 billion. And Stoltenberg even took to Twitter to shower praise on President Trump, tweeting, "Excellent start to NATO meeting in London with President Trump. We are adapting NATO to new challenges and are making unprecedented progress on defense spending." Now, Europe's richest country, Germany, will increase its spending to 1.35% on defense this year. It's still off its commitment, but it does plan to hit that 2% spending in 2031. Now, regardless of spending, many experts say that Germany is actually undermining the NATO alliance by putting so much of its energy reliance on Russia. That, of course, is the very country that NATO was formed to hold in check. Overall, though, President Trump's efforts have been vital in boosting compliance, his NATO pressure campaign appears to be another case where, yes, you can quibble with the president's methods and style, but not as much with the results. All right, let's rejoin our panel. We're back now with Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer and analyst Ali Sinar. Hal, you may not like the president's style, but you can't argue that it's yielding results, at least as far as NATO spending goes. What's your take?
Michelle, you pretty much said it. He has an interesting style. Way back when in graduate school, I studied negotiation, and we actually read his book. And some of the things he does is just it's classic negotiation techniques. But this pressure campaign on NATO seems to have worked. Now, Germany has a long way to go. Keep in mind, Germany is kind of an exceptional case. They had to unify with East Germany. A lot of the concepts, a lot of the basic foundations of the German defense system was based on Cold War. So they had to basically reinvent themselves and figure out how to assimilate this East Germany into the German Federation. So they've had a lot of challenges there. But with that said, they too have been making some pretty significant gains. So, you know, the results kind of speak for themselves. It has worked.
All right, Ali, the president, speaking of Germany, has been a vocal critic of the Nord Stream 2. That is a gas pipeline from Russia to Germany that would make Germany dependent on Russia for a majority of its energy. And as the president says, allow the Kremlin to totally control Germany. Is that a valid criticism?
It is, but if you look overall, many European Union countries are working with Russia because of the relationship from the past. And we need to remind that the neighborhood also from the Eastern Europe too. So Germany needs energy, gas resources. That's why they are partnering with Russia. Same with Turkey. Turkey is working with Russia on the energy, but it doesn't mean that all countries are agreed with Russia. So I think United States is the point that the criticism, I think, is right that Germany is working with Russia. But as I said, many European countries has a strong trade relationship with Russia. So this is a big question overall. It's not just Germany, but I would question a more broader perspective.
All right. Ali, thank you so much. Ali Sinar, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer. Appreciate it as always.